Hey, my people, it is I, your favorite crazy lady, and welcome back to my podcast, My Unexpected Life. How did we get here? A cautionary tale. So, this episode is going to start talking about the story of my life. I'm going to get into my childhood because I think it's important to understand the base story and understanding why I kind of fell into some of the things I did when I was older. We will get into the 2 kidnappings and the 2 attempted murders by my ex husband and the horrible things that he did, but not in this episode. This episode, I want to talk about my childhood because I think that it'll help people understand maybe a little bit more about the dynamics that are me. So, this is my story of my life as I know how it started. Okay? So, I was told my entire life, almost my entire life, I was told the exact same story up until my 40s. But we will get into the reality of the situation later. For now, we're going to stay with the concept of this is the way I grew up and this is what I believed about my life. So I was told growing up that my parents had a very difficult relationship before I was born. It was not abusive. It was not mean. I was always told that there wasn't any infidelities or anything like that, but my father prioritized being in the military and his career over his family, which can be just as devastating. Now, my mom, who the last story that I put out was talking about how my mom was almost the victim of a 1950s serial killer in California. So my mom had trust issues and stuff after that, like anybody would. Hold on. I can't pause this. Why? Because if I pause it, it will mess up my video. I'm trying to figure out a better way to do this. I haven't came up with it yet. So excuse me. But what the way my mother always told it, and my father told me this, that they had the same story. But the way my mother always told me was that they had a very tumultuous relationship because my father cared more about building his plans for the military than he did about his, making sure he was home for his family. My father was very much a patriot. He believed that being part of the military was his absolute calling, and he loved it. He loved every aspect of it. And the more I learned about what my dad did in the military when I got older, I can understand it. I can truly understand why my dad didn't want to give it up. But my father would come home, be home for usually 2 to 3 months, get my mom pregnant, and then he would leave again. And he would be gone anywhere from 8 months to 16 months. They never knew how long he was going to be gone for. Sometimes he wasn't even like deployed and put off anywhere. He was just working on a security clearance project that he wasn't allowed to leave the base for. And when he had those particular assignments that he was working on, he wasn't even allowed to call my mom and have contact with her. It was radio silence. So my mom didn't even know if he was in town until he would come back home. And then he'd be like, oh yeah, I was literally 5 miles down the road for like a year working on this project. And then of course, my mom's taking care of, and I was born in 68. So this was the 50s and the 60s of my mom taking care of my brother and my 2 sisters. Plus at this time, my cousin was also living in the household, and we were raised with her being our sister. I did not know that she was not my sister until I think I was close to 12 was when I was told. So My mom was tired. She was like, I'm tired of this. My dad worked for Lockheed Martin when they were a division of the military. He also worked with NASA doing stuff with the military. So my dad had almost like a dual life that he was living at that point. He always said that he loved the military. He loved it. It was something that he enjoyed doing. But, he realized when everything fell apart and he lost everything that he really loved his family and he loved his family more. You got to get out of my way, bub. Thank you, baby. Go lay down here. So my mom had gotten pregnant and she was just about ready to give birth to the sister before me. And he gets sent away. He is gone. And my mom was like, this is horrible. I don't know what to do. He's always gone. My grandmother, who hated my father for years, they ended up having a fantastic relationship at the end. But she hated him. She saw him as being less than and below her, and that she wanted nothing to do with him as part of our family. So some of the events that happen, I kind of take back because she was instrumental in getting them back together. Baby, stop, honey. Go lay down. Come on, go lay down. Lay down. No, lay down. So he had left and he was working on a special plane. Now the plane, I can talk about it now, because one, my father is gone, and there can be no ramifications for him sharing information with me, and his plane has been declassified. So my father worked on a plane called the Q Star. It is one of only 5 planes called the Q Star. There was only 5 built. Each plane was built by a different team who had no idea the other teams existed. Every one of them thought that they were the only team with that plane. Now, this was a very special reconnaissance plane. It held 2 people, and it was a motorized glider. The thing that made this plane so special was the fact that it could fly 20 feet over your head with the engine running, and you would not have known it until it was past you, and it's way down there, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, where the hell did that come from? My dad was so proud of that plane. My dad worked with the engineers that drew up the schematics and everything else for that as the lead engineer. My dad was the one that put his plane together. Each plane was only built by 4 people. There was a lead engineer that was for drawing up the schematics and making sure everything works. There was an engine specialist. There was a lead mechanic. And then there was basically somebody that filled in as a helper that did with everything that was going on. My dad was the lead mechanic on his. My dad was actually working on his plane to get it up to where it could be flown again and taken to air shows by a private investor when my father died. 3 of the planes were destroyed. My dad's plane ended up in a museum outside of NASA in Houston, which got destroyed during a hurricane, and then the insurance auctioned off the entire hangar. A private collector bought it. It changed hands a few times, and then a guy got my dad's plane and ended up contacting the military and was given a redacted, it was like this big. It was like this big of information on that plane, and everything was blacked out. The only thing my dad that he could see was 5 names and the location where it was built, and everything else was blacked out. So he was able to get a hold of, find everybody that worked on it, and my dad was the only one that was still living. But my dad was the important one because my dad was the one who put the plane together in the first place. Unfortunately, my father died while he was. Don't cry. Mm. Unfortunately, my father died while he was working on it. He had an agreement made with the man that owned the plane that that would be my first airplane ride. It was in his plane. I know that'll never happen because I don't know who they could find to put it together. But I think it would be amazing if they could find somebody that could and make it work the way it was supposed to work. So anyway, now that cry fest is over with, um, both of my parents are gone. It still hurts me to this day, like it's day one. My mom has been gone for almost 14 years, and my dad has been gone for 6. And it still hurts like day one. I was extremely close to my parents. Okay. So my father was in, I believe it was Korea, with his plane. He had been gone at that point um, for over a year because he was in California for so long, and then before he got deployed overseas with the plane, because he was the only one that was allowed to work on it. So he had to go over with the plane to make sure if there was any problems, it could get worked on. Actually, the entire team got sent over. He couldn't contact my mother very often, but they did allow him to contact her a couple of times a month. And my mom was like, I don't want to do this anymore. She was tired. She was tired of raising a family and him never being there. I mean, that wasn't what she signed up for, right? She signed up for them to be together, even though she was very understanding of him wanting to be in the military. She was like, I can't do this anymore. And she filed for an official separation from the military while my father was overseas. Now, this was in the 60s, the late 60s, and you were not allowed to separate from your husband, get a divorce from your husband, or do anything else from your husband without the military's approval. My mother had talked to a captain that was the head of his division or whatever, and explained to them what was going on. They ended up granting my mother a legal separation because my mom was also going to school to become a respiratory therapist with the end goal of becoming a pulmonary doctor. That was her end goal. So she ended up getting a separation from him through the military. And she started dating a man that she met at college. And they got into a relationship for just a few months before my father ended up coming home. My father came home and called my mom from the base and said that we are back and I'll be home on such and such date. And my mother was like, you don't live here anymore. You already knew this. You don't belong here. He ended up going and living for several months with my mother's mother, who hated him. Grandma Ruby had a real disdain for him because she thought that he was below her daughter. She thought he was below her daughter. So he did end up going and staying with them, and he kept putting Grandma Ruby in the middle. And she's like, if you want her, you're going to have to win her back. So he started talking to my mom again and asked what he could do. And she's like, I don't know if there's anything you can do. He found out that she was dating somebody else and got extremely jealous. And he's like, no, I want my family back. So he started dating my mom. And My mother always told me that she'd never got into a sexual relationship with the other person, wasn't a, which is completely believable for back in that time period. That was not something that, people just did. Um, so when she figured out that she was pregnant, she talked to my dad, and he was like, "Well, I want my family back." And they sat down and talked about all of their problems. They worked everything out, and she broke up with the other guy, and he moved back home. And about, I think mom said, a couple of months after that, I was born. And I was extremely sick. It was not until I was in my mid 40s that I found out that all of that was a lie. I'm not going to get into that in this one, because it's important to how I grew up thinking that this was my reality. So I always said that I got the best of my parents because they had problems and then they fixed them, and I got the best version of them. Now, when I was born, I was premature and I was extremely sick. I was not allowed to come home for like 4 or 5 months. I was completely jaundiced, my liver was not working properly, and I was underdeveloped. So it was touch and go if I was even going to make it. There was a child that was born, my brother Richard was born between my two sisters. And it was a very hard situation for my mom because she had to go through this basically alone of having a child that had severe birth defects. He had an enlarged heart, he had fluid on his brain, and he did not make it more than, I think it was almost 2 weeks. When he died in the hospital, he never got to come home. There would have been 13 of us kids if every time mom got pregnant with a set of twins, if she would not have miscarried. There would have been 13 of us children. That's a lot of kids. So my mom kind of looked at me as her last effort baby. I was extremely sick. I was sick growing up. I was in and out of hospitals. And I don't mean, oh, I'm just in, like, in the emergency room. No, I was in and out of hospitals for months at a time. I remember not being able to keep food down. I think I was around 4, but I couldn't keep food down. I was constantly vomiting, and they had no clue what was wrong with me. I went into the hospital, and they were running test after test on me. Now, I give no judgment to this whatsoever because I understand this was a different time period. This was a different time when things were done in different ways. I remember being in the basement of a hospital where they do like x-rays and such. There was a large steel pillar that held up, like a column in the middle of the room. They tied me to that pillar because they needed me to stand up to do this test, but I couldn't move. So they took my legs and they tied my knees together so I couldn't step around. And then they went around my ankles and went around the pillar to the other ankle, and they tied that. They tied my pelvis, my torso, and my neck to the pillar. My hands were tied also down around each wrist, around the back of the pillar, and then tied up. I was tied in a way that it didn't hurt me. There was no pain involved. Everything was soft material. It's just this is what they had to do to be able to do this test. The doctor came in and explained to me what they were going to do, and I had to drink a horrible milkshake. Now I know that that is barium and other, stuff that they can track things going through your body with. I was completely awake for this test at like 4 years old. My parents are not there. I am tied to a pillar, and there's a man with what looks like a little pill on a string. And he goes, I need for you to swallow this, but I'm going to be standing here, and you're going to have to swallow the string too. I was horrified. So we did it once without running the test because they wanted me to know what it was, so I wasn't scared to do it. I remember thinking it didn't hurt. I can still remember it. I can still smell the antiseptic smell from the hospital. This is a core memory. They did it and it went part way down. And they pulled it out. And he was like, that is awesome. You're going to do great. Okay, the other one that we're going to do now is a little bit bigger. He goes, just breathe through your nose and try not to throw up. Now, I had not been given any food or water, so there was no chance I was going to throw up anyway. What they were doing was they were taking an endoscope and putting it down my throat. The biggest thing looking back on this in retrospective that I find hilarious about the whole thing is that they started having problems with me while we were doing the test because I kept turning my head. And he's like, if you keep turning your head, I'm going to have to tie your forehead up so you can't move at all. They took it out, and they're like, you tried to explain to me that I have to be still. And I was like, I want to see. And he goes, what are you talking about? I went, the TV. I want to see the TV. I could see out of the corner of my eye part of the TV screen that they were monitoring on. It was like an old box type TV on a cart, so that everything was very portable and right there. And he goes, you don't want to see that? And I was like, yes, I do. I want to see. And he goes, well, if I let you watch, will you sit still? I was like, yes. So I did. And at 4, maybe 5 years old, I watched the very first endoscope that I ever had done stuck down my mouth, go past my vocal cords, and into my stomach. And I thought it was fascinating. When I got done, I remember talking to them and having them ask me if I was scared. And I was like, no, I wasn't scared. And I remember having one of the techs, I don't know if he was an x-ray technician, if he was a doctor, or who the hell he was. But I just remember him laughing and saying, well, you're pretty special. Because most people would have been scared. And I was like, I wasn't scared. I thought it was fascinating. And I think that is what started my whole fascination with the body, how the body works, and wanting to know everything that is wrong with me. My mother had part of her school books, and one of them was a big, huge, it probably wasn't this big, but it seemed this big at that age. It was monstrously huge, and in the middle of this book was a bunch of clear sheets, and it was peel away sheets so that they stacked on top of each other and made an entire person. And as you took it off, it would peel off the skin, and you'd see the veins, and then you would take that away and you'd see the muscle. And I just thought it was one of the most fascinating books I'd ever read. And my mom was like, it doesn't scare her, so let her look at it. I remember being in and out of the hospital so much when I was a kid. I remember spending more time in the hospital than out. And I realize that's not realistic. But those are the core memories that stuck. I remember being 6 years old and being in the hospital, and I was so little, and my parents had to leave me because they lived so far away that nobody could stay with me all the time. My parents ran their own businesses. So they ran a series of restaurants called Jerry's Friendly Cafes in Galena, Illinois. And I was so little at the time that they put me in the maternity ward. That way people could keep a better eye on me. And then the maternity ward got full. So they asked one of the girls that I had been talking to that was bedridden. They're like, hey, we need to put her in somewhere for a couple of days. Can we put her in here with you just so she's not, by herself and she's not, pushed off somewhere else? And she was like, oh, of course. This woman was so kind to me. When she went into labor, she told the nurses, because by this time I was moved back into my own room. She told the nurses to go and get me when she went into labor. I was the first person other than her and the doctors to see her baby. Now, at this particular hospital, which was a smaller hospital, there was a big viewing room with big glass, and then the babies were, like in their little corral area. And behind that was the cleaning station for when they gave birth. They would take the babies in, clean them up, weigh them, do all the stuff that they needed to do. So I actually got to watch them do that with her baby. They told me that she was having the baby. They opened up the curtains, which did not go into the delivery room, just where the babies were. Gave me a chair and told me to watch that door. Because when they come through that door, they're going to have that baby. And I remember sitting there and just watching the door. And then I heard the crying. And I was like, that's a different baby. And then the nurse comes in the room holding this bloody, gunky baby. A nurse comes out and talks to me, and they're like, I don't want you to be scared. This is the way babies come out. We have to give it a bath. And of course, at that age, I don't know where babies actually, they're in the belly. Wow. So I got to watch them weigh the baby and do the prick test on its foot so they could blood match it and take its, its blood type and all of that. And I got to hold the baby after she held the baby. And for me, that was so special. And I wanted to have a family. I'd always wanted to have a family. But I think that was my start of my wanting my own children. Because my mom even said things changed for me after that. Because I talked about this baby for years after. But that's what core memories are, right? Core memories are those things that we don't necessarily think of being milestone events, but actually are. I have a pulmonary issue. As I talk, I run out of oxygen. So I'm not tired and I'm not bored, but as I talk, it lowers my oxygen level, so it makes me yawn. When I got into kindergarten, I was not allowed to go into kindergarten at age 5 like most kids. Why? Because I missed the cutoff date by 2 weeks. I was not allowed to go into kindergarten until I was in 6th grade. 6th grade. Stop. Age 6. Jesus. So I was 6 years old when I went into kindergarten. Kindergarten was half days. I remember my mom getting several phone calls and called into the office because I used to think I was in trouble all the time. And I couldn't figure out what I had done wrong because I was always like getting called into the principal's office. And then my mom would show up, she'd go in and talk to them, and then we would leave and go home. And then, the next day I'd go to school again. So when I went into first grade, and I was there not half days but a full day, I started struggling in school. And I didn't notice what was going on. My teachers said that I was aloof and that I would steer off into space a lot. That I never paid attention in class and that I basically was not wanting to pay attention. I ended up having a teacher's aide that came in right out of college. She told my parents that I was not staring into space. I wasn't daydreaming like my other teachers said. She thought I was having seizures and suggested that my parents get me checked. So they did and found out that I had petit mal seizures. Petit mal seizures are absent seizures. That's one of the reasons why when I'm talking sometimes I look like I dip out for a second and then I have to like bring myself back in, is because my mind literally still just goes blank sometimes. It's literally like there's a glitch in my brain. So as things are firing and they're supposed to be connecting, sometimes they don't connect. And for me, when my synapses aren't connecting properly, that means my mind kind of shuts off. There's a pause. Unfortunately, it also meant that I had a severe stutter as a child. It comes out now when I am stressed, when I am sad. I will start to stutter. It's one of the reasons why I repeat myself. People think that people who stop, think about what they're going to say, and then say it, and then sometimes they repeat themselves and they say it again. They think they're being aloof, they're not paying attention. It's Alzheimer's, it's older people not paying attention, and it's not what it is. It is literally your brain just glitches. It actually does it in text as well. I can be texting and I will repeat words as I text them. I can't help it. It's also why you will see me kind of look up or off to the side, and I'll stop and I'll think, and then I'll start talking again. It's because that was part of speech therapy from the 50s to the 90s in teaching children with a severe stutter or a speech impediment how to talk properly. That's one of the reasons why President Biden did it. I recognized it first couple times I saw it. I was like, oh, I bet he had a speech impediment when he was younger. And then it came out to find out, yeah, he did. He had a speech impediment. It's part of the way you're taught how to make your thoughts more concise, because things get jumbled up in our brains. We hear the stutter in our head, and then it comes out our mouth. So anyway, so I was always very, very sick. Because I was sick and I was different, I was bullied a lot. I was beat up in schools. I had clothes ripped off of me at school by boys. I would have black eyes some days. And we were never allowed to fight back, ever. Because if you fight back, then you're the problem. It's not the boy causing the problem. And case in point, first day of 6th grade, I wanted to wear this very pretty dress that I really, really liked. And my mom was like, "Are you sure that's what you want to wear?" And I was like, "Yes, I love this dress. I want to wear it." And it was a very flowy skirt and top. And my mom insisted that I wear pantyhose, not tights, pantyhose. And I hated it. I hated it. I hated it every time she made me wear them. And I got to school, and we're on the playground waiting for having to line up in front of our school, our doors, going to our classrooms outside, because that particular school had every class had their own outside entry. There was a door that went directly into your schoolroom. So every morning we would have to line up in front of our door to get into the class. There was a boy that was teasing me. This is a boy that I'd had problems with before. And I had always told my mom and my dad, I was like, one of these days, I'm not going to take it anymore. And my dad always told me that people aren't going to because I was a big kid. I was taller than all my other classmates because I was a year later coming into everything. So I was, bigger, older, stronger. So my dad always told me that I had to be careful. This kid came up behind me and he goes, "That's a really pretty dress. Are you wearing underwear with it?" And I was like, "You're dumb." And I remember we got into an argument and we were lining up for class, and he reached down, grabbed my skirt, and lifted it all the way up to my shoulders, completely exposing the bottom half of my body. And then he grabbed the pantyhose, and when he grabbed it, he ripped it and he gouged my back with his nails. And he was like, "What, you think you're a woman?" I turned around and grabbed that boy's wrist and twisted it so hard and pulled his arm up behind his back like my brother had taught me to do to defend myself. And I broke his arm. He immediately started screaming. Teacher comes over, grabs both of us. He goes in, they call an ambulance for him, they call my parents. My mom and dad show up, because my dad, I don't remember why my dad was home that day. He normally wouldn't have been. And I remember hearing my dad yell at them, "Well, then what are you going to do to the boy that assaulted my daughter?" And they told them nothing. He did nothing wrong. I got suspended for 3 weeks and had to go work in my mom and dad's restaurant for 3 weeks. All because a boy pulled up my skirt above my waist, gouged my back, left marks going down my back, and ripped my pantyhose. But because I broke his arm, he did nothing wrong. My entire life, every time somebody would do something to me, I was taught it was my fault. My parents did not abuse me. My parents did not sexually abuse me. There was only one particular time that I can say that my father physically abused me. And I understand it, and I know there's a lot of people that are going to be like, there's no reason to hit a child. But I understand why he did what he did. And I forgave him for it. And I take responsibility for part of it. Because I was not an easy child when it came to school. I was a great, I'd help mom and dad with everything. I thought my family was wonderful and all I wanted to do was help my family. But when it came to school, because I was always being picked on, teased, and abused in school, I didn't want to go. My parents were great people and they taught me a lot. They taught me a lot on how to be a good person. My brother, who is like 12 years older than me and has now passed away, was a great friend. We had a little bit of a tumultuous relationship at the end, but that was more from his choosing. My brother and I had such a great relationship that every date he went on in high school except for one, he took me on every first date. And the reason why he did was he said that he could tell the character of a person by how they treated me. And if they didn't treat me nice, they didn't treat me well, if they ignored me, if they were mean to me, he would never see them again. The same with the girls that overdid it. The ones that were like trying to make sure that they won me over and were fake. He didn't go out with them again either. The only date I did not go on with him in high school was the woman that he ended up marrying the first time. And the reason why I didn't go on the first date with them was because my brother had her as a tutor. And they were friends for 2 years before they started dating. So there was no reason for him to take me because he knew how she would treat me. She treated me great. She treated me like a little sister. Yeah, she would get fed up with me at times and tell me to bug her off, but she was never mean to me. She would help me through things. But school was very difficult for me. And my brother knew it. My brother was the one that actually taught me how to climb out onto the roof of the house we were in Galena, Illinois, so that I would conveniently miss the school bus. And then I'd have to stay home all day because I couldn't walk to the outside of town to, get to school. And mom and dad were already gone by then. My sister, after him, she treated me like her best friend as a child. She treated me as a confidant and shared things with me she shouldn't have because I was her little sister and she knew that if she said don't tell, I wouldn't tell. Because my parents strictly believed that you should always be honest and you should always tell the truth. But if somebody confides in you, that's not your story to tell. So like when my sister came up junior in high school and ended up thinking she was pregnant, I was the one that she went to. And I was the one that she told that she had to go to the doctor because she thought she was pregnant. Those were the kind of secrets that she would share with me that shouldn't have been shared with me. But I always thought that my sister cared about me and just wanted me to be part of her life. Her first husband also treated me like a sibling. He would actually come over to the house when she was working at mom and dad's restaurant or had other things going on, and he would show up. And I remember one particular time he showed up and it was myself and my sister right above me home by ourselves. And I was like, Beverly's not here. And he's like, no, I came over to see you. And I was like, oh, and he lived in Wisconsin. We were in Galena, Illinois. So, I mean, he's about an hour or so away. He didn't even go to school there. They met at some team event. And he's like, "No, I came over to spend time with you." And I remember playing Star Trek in the house with him. These are the memories that are really like and ingrained in me, that makes me believe that I had a good childhood. I remember playing darts in the backyard with my sister Beverly, and David coming out and going, "Oh, you guys are standing too close to the target. That's why you guys are doing so good. You're standing too close." And Beverly was like, "But there's nowhere else to put the target." And he goes, "Sure there is. You can just hold it for each other." And my dumbass sister holds this big, I mean, it was thick. It was like this freaking thick. One of those big freaking, like, dart bullseye board thing. What do they call that? Is it a dartboard? It's gotta be dartboard, right? The big round ones that used to hang on the wall. And she's holding it. And he goes, "Well, don't hold it down here, because if I miss, I can hit your face. Hold it up here." And she did. The first two darts went in fine. The third dart, however, hit and then fell. It didn't bounce out. It fell. And it fell and stuck in her foot. And she was screaming at my brother. And the neighbor comes over and he looks at her and he goes, "Oh God." And my brother's like, "I'll just put her in the car. I'll take her to the hospital." And so we went with her. I went with them. We went in the car to the hospital so she could go into the ER to have this dart removed from her foot. And these are the reasons why I say I had a good childhood. I truly believed that. My sister right above me was a whole nother story. My sister above me, Lorna, did horrible and unspeakable things to me. She did things that no one should ever have to endure. She would burn me with cigarettes. She would beat me. And I mean from the time I was little. She would do things. And when I would say things to my friends about my sister's mean to me, most of my friends who had siblings would be like, "Yeah, well, my sibling's mean to me too." Well, my sister hurts me. Well, mine does too. So I grew up thinking that the abuse that she was doing was just the abuse that we all went through. It wasn't abuse. We didn't look at the things that we went through as abuse. They were just the things that we went through. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I realized that the things that she did were abuse. And the whole time we're going through all of this, I am in and out of the hospital. I am in the hospital where they shaved my head and glued electrodes to my head, and then, kept me hooked up to an EKG machine for like a weekend. Had to go to the bathroom in a commode next to the bed because of all the wiring that was glued to my head. wasn't able to do anything without a nurse being in my room. I couldn't even, like, adjust my bed. I couldn't do anything without the nurses coming in and making sure it was okay because of the wires. At the age 14, I suddenly could not see anymore. My vision had become so blurred and such a big issue that I had to see a specialist. And they told me that whatever was going on within my brain was causing my eyes not to focus together at the same time. So that left me with nearsighted and farsighted at the same time. Unfortunately, after I had a series of strokes, that problem is back. I'm going to wrap up this one in a few minutes because Lily's mom is home. I don't know if she's going to need to talk to me. The next episode, I want to get involved with some more things about my childhood, but I really want to delve into the things that my sister did and why we need to stop normalizing the things that we went through and not calling it what it is, which was abuse. We need to be able to call it for what it is so that we can heal from it and get better. But ow, get off my knee. But I think I'm going to wrap this up for now. But like I always say, it's just my 2 cents. Take what you want, leave the rest. And until we meet again, and hopefully we meet again soon, have the day that you deserve. But only you can make sure that it is awesome.